Hi, my name is Bob and I'm renovating this 1973 Egg Harbor Sportfish boat. Welcome to Renovation Sportfish. Here we are in my home shop here. Doing an introduction for episode 8. In this episode we cover projects I worked on in the year 2013 in the months of July, August, and September. So these are good months for doing epoxy and installing things, so that's what you're going to be seeing a lot of in this video. Here we go, Renovation Sportfish, episode 8. Hope you enjoy it. Well, in the last episode I had replaced the upper main bulkhead on the port side. So the next thing I wanted to do was to remove and replace the that'll be the back 1/3 of the side window on the port side. Now this piece from the factory was made with about maybe 6 pieces of wood, and all the joints on between these pieces of wood were all failing. It wasn't fiberglass or anything, it was just painted wood. So inevitably these joints were going to fail, and they did. So before I could just chop everything off here, I had to attach some plywood temporarily to the outside because I wanted to use this entire chunk to make a template so I could use it to fabricate the new piece. So that's what you're going to be seeing in these beginning photos. Some of the other things I had to do is I had to remove some of the frame for the actual window to sit in on the inside of the boat. Don't really have any pictures of that frame removal. There's a lot of little pieces, but you'll see pictures when I reinstall it. I don't know what you call it. I'm going to call it part of the cockpit combing, I guess. So a little piece of mahogany, probably about 1.5 feet long, that had rotted. I mean, it's a piece that runs along the whole hoverboard area in the cockpit. But only that first chunk there that was like I said, 1.5 feet long that attached to the window needed to be replaced. The rest of it was in fine shape. So that's what I had to do next before I could put a new window frame in. So back at the shop, I had to fabricate the new piece of window frame. I had the old piece with the plywood on it, but I couldn't really use that as a template because it was just too rotted and it was not good enough to use as a template. So I had to make a template from that piece of chunk of wood. So what I used, and I was originally using 1/4-inch plywood to make my templates, but I found that to be kind of expensive and kind of wasteful. So I found this kind of wood, and I get this at the big box store, and it's a little bit thinner, and it's used for some sort of underlayment or something. You can get it in 4x8 sheets, and it's about $15. I think I paid for 4x8 sheets. So it's not really expensive, and I was going to use this template to do 2 sides, so I want to make something that's not going to be just some flimsy little piece of cardboard or something. And I use it to actually double-side tape it on there, and use my router with a flush cutting bit and actually use it as a guide to cut the actual piece out. So I wanted something decent. And this stuff sands really good, cuts really easy, doesn't have hardly any voids in it that I could find, and it works out great. So that's what I used to make the template, this material. Now, I was going to try to show what I actually used for the template, but I can't find it. I must have probably cut it up and used it to make a template for something else. So unfortunately, I don't have anything to show except for that scrap of wood. So when I put these frame assemblies together, I'm always talking about joining them with biscuits. Now I know that some viewers may not be familiar with carpentry and woodwork and that kind of thing. And so I'm giving you this little just demo type thing just to explain what I'm talking about, just so when I use the terminology, you know what I'm talking about. But anyways, here's a biscuit. This is number 20. Comes in 20s and 10s, so this is a 20. It's a little bigger. It's just a piece of wood shaped kind of like a football. You get them in a whole bunch of bin like this when you buy them. This is the biscuit joiner, they call it. It basically cuts a slot to put that biscuit in on both pieces of wood. You push this in over here, and the blade pops out. You can have different settings for different sized biscuits. You can raise and lower this height of this plate here, so you can center the slot in whatever thickness of wood you're using. This thing also angles up and down if you want to get fancy with that. I never use that. I just set it like this and go. It's got a dust collector on this side that I'm not going to use here. But so yeah, that's it. It's got a line down the center here to line up where you're going to put your biscuits. Now you take two pieces of wood, and basically what I do is once I get everything set where I want it, I'll just take these things and kind of lay them on the joint, where I want them. Say I wanted them that close or something, I don't know. And then I would mark on the pieces of wood. In this instance I only have one mark already on here, right across it, so I know where to cut the slots when I pull the pieces apart. So once I pull it apart, then I just take my tool, say the depth is already set to the depth I need, line up the tool with the mark here, right across there, hold it down firmly, press the trigger and push this in. The blade comes out, cuts a slot. There's not a lot of torque or anything like that. It cuts it nice and clean. And yeah, then once you're done, what I do is I wet this out with epoxy. I mean, you can use glue if you're going to do glue. I use epoxy because I'm doing the boat. I'll wet this out with just unthickened epoxy, and I'll wet these out with unthickened epoxy. I just get them and throw them in a tray with a bunch of epoxy and just swish it around and then set them aside on some plastic until I'm ready to put them in. And then the two pieces of wood I'll take and put thickened epoxy on there, put it in the actual slots. This has two slots, but I'm only going to show one. And then I'll take this biscuit and just put it in the slot, and flip it around here, and put the two pieces together, clamp it. And the epoxy oozes all over the place. You clean it up, no big deal. And that's it. You let it dry, and it's as simple as that. Creates a nice joint, kind of lines up the pieces so they're flush, and yeah, it works good. So now we can get into the fabrication and installation of the new window frame. Like I said before, the factory used about 6 pieces of wood to create this frame piece. It was pretty complicated. The pieces of wood I thought were they had these different kind of angles going on in there and everything, which was great for them with the templates and probably the way they were going to use the wood. But I didn't want to just duplicate that, just to duplicate it. So I used 4 pieces of wood. Now I used the same mahogany, 1-inch thick pieces. I rough cut them to the sizes I wanted to use and cut the angles the way I wanted to put these pieces together, and then kind of dry assembled them together, marked where I was going to put all these biscuits, and then cut the slots for the biscuits. set it on my table with a piece of plastic underneath so nothing would stick, and then epoxied all these pieces together and clamped them and let them dry overnight. Yeah, so once this assembly was dry, then I was able to take the template I had created and lay it on there and trace it with a pencil, just to be able to follow along with a jigsaw and cut out kind of a rough shape that I wanted. Probably left about 1/4 of an inch or so around the whole perimeter. Then I came back and put the double-sided tape the template onto the piece again, and then I used that as the guide with my router and my flush cutting bit, and just routed around the whole perimeter to get the final shape I wanted. Once I had the shape I wanted, I brought the finished piece over to the boat and gave it a quick fit in place using some clamps and things, angles I used on the inside to try to align the two faces together. Once I was satisfied with the fit, it fit pretty good. I just needed to tweak it a little bit here and there. Once I was satisfied with that, then I marked on the existing and the new piece where I wanted to use put my biscuits. And I cut those using the methods I just talked about and epoxied them together with the methods I just talked about as well. Once that joint between the new and existing window frame dried, then I went to what I would call like a second stage of installation, because at this point the window frame wasn't really attached to the main bulkhead at all. The first thing I did was I just lined up and installed some screws from the window frame into the bulkhead. I knew everything was fitting well. I pulled all the screws out. I pried the actual window frame away from the bulkhead so that I could wet out with unthickened epoxy the actual bulkhead edge of the plywood and the window frame where it was going to meet together. And then once that was done, I mixed up some thickened epoxy, put it in both joints, and brought the pieces back together, screwed everything together, and then cleaned up the joint. Once this window frame was installed, then I had to replace these pieces that I had removed in the previous episode. I call them the upper side window, inner plywood piece. There's some big long name. I'll show a little diagram here of the actual piece I'm talking about. And I had to replace these pieces both in the front near the windshield and at the back with these bigger frame pieces. Back 1/3 of the frame was. So yeah, I fit some pieces in there. I used mahogany, probably like a 3/4 inch mahogany piece. The original whole piece was plywood from the factory. I didn't have to replace the entire piece, just the ends were rotted away. So with those pieces in, now we can move back over, or move over, I should say, to the starboard side and start tackling the main bulkhead and the side window frame on that side. I'll start with the main bulkhead, and if you saw my previous episode, you saw me replace the main bulkhead, or at least the upper half, on the port side. So this wasn't much different. Same basic thing. The bulkhead is a little bit different in the fact that it has a window in it, but other than that, it was a little wider as well. So because of that, on the port side, I was able to use one sheet of plywood because it was a little less than 4 feet, whereas the starboard side, it was probably more like 4'9", 4'10". So I had to scarf on a separate piece later on. And I actually say scarf, but I actually lap jointed a piece on there and epoxied it. So you're going to see that in the photos as well. I did have to contend with cutting an opening for the window. And when you look at the bulkhead and the window opening, you're probably going to say, wow, that opening's awful big for the window that was there before. And it is. And it is for a reason, because there is a whole frame that goes in there to add the fabricating to match the existing window size. So that's why it's so big and square. When I get to that other frame, you'll see it's going to be another episode. You'll see how that all works together. So no worries, the hole isn't too big. One more thing I'll note before we cut out the bulkhead and replace that. I really didn't take any pictures of the bulkhead being removed. It's kind of like the old one's there and then the new one's there. I don't know why I didn't take any photos, but I didn't take any. But I do have a couple of photos of the actual overhang from the flybridge in the beginning. Now this piece I definitely was going to have to replace on both sides. And I just removed it on the other side. The other side the port side had a piece of a ladder, a chunk attached to it. That was actually attached after the fact, because when I removed it, the trim piece that was up underneath was still there, up under this big chunk of wood. But on this side, I was taking the photos more so that I could recreate that overhang later on, and you'll see how rotted and delaminated this plywood is. Yeah, so now that the starboard side upper main bulkhead was in, the next thing to do is to remove the side window on that starboard side. Now the piece was almost identical to the size piece that I took out and replaced on the port side. It was a little bit different. I had to cut the wood a little bit, actually cut it a little bit shorter, so I had to modify my template a little bit, but that was fine, better than the other way around, luckily. But I had planned all that out beforehand. So I had to remove that, and you just see a photo of it there and gone again. And then once I got that out of there, that cleared the way for me to scarf in that extra little piece of plywood on the bulkhead. So that's what you're going to see. So now it's time for a little deja vu. I mean, I just replaced the port side back 1/3 of the side window. I had to do the same thing on the starboard side. Basically replace the same pieces. That little piece in the cockpit, the actual 1/3 of the window, and the pieces, the one piece above it. So one of my goals for this summer was to finish replacing any pieces of shear clamp that were rotted. I had inspected underneath the cockpit cover boards and that whole area there, and none of those pieces seemed to be rotted. So I was hopeful when I removed everything in the end that those were not going to have to be replaced. That left me with only about maybe a 4 or 5 foot piece left to do on each side. They were a little bit tricky only because the gunnel coming down along the side window and the cockpit, there was kind of an angle there, a nice little angle. So I had to figure out how all that was going to work together, because if you remember, if you saw like the previous episode when I had first opened up that whole area, it was really nasty and rotted, and I didn't even know what was going on in there. So it was time to deal with all that area. These shear clamps were all in. There was only one thing left to do before I wrap up this video, and that's deals with the air intake area. Now the air intake area, which I call it, is where on the side window kind of extensions that I just got in, there was an air scoop kind of screwed to the side of it. Now this air scoop ducted air down into the engine compartment, and the air scoop's going to be there again. I might modify it a little bit to make it look a little more lean and attractive looking, but it's still going to be there. And from that air scoop, there was an air duct, just a piece of rectangular ductwork that was made out of galvanized steel. It needed to be replaced. I didn't want to do galvanized steel, so I had this one fabricated. This is the port one here. I had two fabricated actually. It's the port side one. And it's made out of stainless steel. I had a local guy fabricate these. It's basically just a rectangular piece of ductwork with, I had him put a full flange on this end. The factory one, if this was the side window over here, it only had a 3-sided flange and it was right up against the wood. But I wanted it to be away from the side wood, and I thought this would be a better way to attach it, because I could use, I had drilled 4 holes in this flange for screws. So this whole thing like just drops down into a rectangular opening that you're going to see in a minute in a piece of mahogany. And I'll put sealant all around the bottom so it'll be all sealed in. Unlike the factory one where it was up against the wood in the window, it wasn't really sealed good there, and water got down in there, and that's what helped rot out some of the wood around in that area. So yeah, these things fit great. I've already fit them in the finished product, and they came out really nice. Guy only charged me like $50 each, which I thought was a good price for these. So anyways, that's what you're going to see in these last final photos of this episode. For episode 8. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So until next time, have a good one, and we'll see you soon right here on Renovation Sportfish.